Welcome to the International Dynasty Download. My name is Delft Dad, and today we are going roster diving again. But this time, we're looking at No Siento. This man has been the owner of 7th place for now 3 years running. In terms of historic performance, I don't know if there is a team that has had a more purgatory style run than what No Siento has had over the last 3 years. And the best part is the first two were completely opposite. 2019 starts us off. He finishes 12th in the league at 6-7. A rough playoff run ends up with him finishing last, despite nearly being 500. 2020, he returns with a vengeance, making the playoffs and making a run, ends up getting knocked out in the semifinals to end up in the 3rd place matchup, which he ends up winning. And then he falls into this just incredible mid-tier play, going 5-9 for the next 2 seasons, but spiking hard towards the end of the year, giving quite a lot of hope for the following year, only for that hope to be dashed, not once, but twice, where he returns the next year after a late season run just to finish with a losing record again. His 2023 finish was 7th place as well. He was 4-10, and again had a late season run. Overall, he is 29-39, and the Decatur Staleys are looking to hopefully have this year be the one year that they turn it around for real this time. As we always do, we start at the top. It's a super flex league, so we're starting with the most important position, quarterbacks. And this is probably the greatest strength, but also I think tells the story of why this team has struggled to make it into the playoffs in this league. If we look at the top, we have Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, 2 stud quarterbacks. Brock Purdy is a great quarterback 2 for Superflex, exactly the type of guy that you want to have as your QB2. Really consistent, not a guy who gets hurt very often. But after that, we really see why this team has struggled, in my opinion. Zach Wilson, QB 38 listed here, was a first-round pick. Daniel Jones, QB 23 listed here, was a first-round pick. Bryce Young, QB 17 listed here, was a first-round pick. All of these players are players that high draft capital was spent on, and because of that, we miss, right? We might have end of year spikes, but we end up missing the playoffs because these players have not so far turned out for the better. So Zach Wilson was the 5th overall pick. Bryce Young was the 2nd overall pick. Daniel Jones was traded. Right, so it's been a lot of assets to get this quarterback room, and up until last year, frankly, up until this year, there hasn't been a consistent anchor, right? But this year we see it, right? Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy. This is the pair that we've been looking for, and at age 24 and 25 for Hurts and Purdy, I'm not sure how this room changes at all for the next 5 years. I mean, this is a top tier group now. And Bryce Young, Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, all solid backups. Gardner Minshew, solid backup. All will get playing time during bye weeks and injuries, which is really nice. Nice to have in a Superflex. Moving on down, we start to see where this roster is a little bit more bare bones as well. QB looked good. Kenneth Walker looks good. And then you hit the RB2 mark, and And that's when you're like, oh, okay, where are we at? So Zamir White, Khalil Herbert, 2 solid RB3/RB4s, right? Guys who we want as bench depth, not as our starters. Sean Tucker, Damian Harris, some decent shots, no doubt. Emmanuel Wilson is a good shot, but just guys who really aren't going to contribute much. Kenneth Walker is also scary too. Again, that's a high draft capital pick that immediately became a question mark after the drafting of Zach Charbonnet. And to be honest with you, even now, a year later, we've seen it all play out. I'm still not sure about the future in that backfield. That's a backfield that scares me, in my opinion. And Kenneth Walker held him off this year, but we will see if Zach Charbonnet will eat into his playing time as it goes forward. Potential Josh Jacobs leaving Oakland could be a big win for this roster. Zamir White taking over as maybe not a workhorse back, but instead as a leader of an RBBC. We could see that happening. Definitely within the cards for this offseason. And definitely something that would be a huge boost for this roster, getting an actual RB2. Khalil Herbert, his days in Chicago are numbered, whether it's this year where he actually loses the job to Roschon Johnson, or the following year when he's a free agent and almost undoubtedly not going to get re-signed. So, guy who is going to be fantasy relevant in 2024 via flex play, but not a guy who you're excited about the long-term outcomes for. He's already 25 too. All right, moving on down to the wide receivers. We have what is probably the best Dynasty wide receiver, the number 1 Dynasty wide receiver, maybe. I mean, Justin Jefferson has question marks. CeeDee Lamb does not in terms of quarterback. And then Jamar Chase has yet to put together the year that we've expected. Is CeeDee Lamb the number 1? I don't know. Is CeeDee Lamb top 3? Yeah, lock it in. I mean, there's no one else who fits into that top 3 tier. And so that's really exciting. What is not exciting is the next best wide receiver on this team. Elijah Moore is not the guy you want to see as your wide receiver too. I'll tell you that much. And frankly, after Jake Bobo, there's no one else I want to talk about, right? Greg Dortch is going to be a guy who is going to contribute over the next year, especially if Hollywood Brown leaves Arizona and they draft Marvin Harrison Jr. I think you'll see Greg Dortch as sort of the wide receiver 3 in that offense alongside Michael Wilson. And that'll be a fantasy relevant role on some weeks. But the reality is that, I mean, this group here is just, it's a dearth of talent. But I will say this, there is one player on this roster who was drafted in the first round of the startup draft for this Dynasty League. And those of you who remember what the fantasy world was like in 2019 might be pulling your hair out or laughing a little bit, because Juju Smith-Schuster has fallen from grace. Formerly the Dynasty wide receiver 1, back in 2019, he was taken with the first round, 7th overall pick. He is now the wide receiver 104 at age 27. Absolute plummet from grace. Now, I don't believe that Sam is the original, or No Siento was the original owner, but man, oh man, is it weird to see him that far down on a roster. Overall player 290, according to this website. Absolutely brutal. This is the number 1 need for this roster right here, wide receivers. You can't build a good team in Dynasty without having a good core of wide receivers. Doesn't matter if you have Kenneth Walker. It doesn't matter if you have good quarterbacks. If you can't field 4 startable wide receivers in this league, you're going to really struggle. All right, moving on down, we have tight ends. And this is a group that I think Siento can really hang his hat on for a long time. Like quarterback, we see a good young player at the top, right? We have Trey McBride, age 24, tight end 3 out of Arizona. This guy showed flashes, especially towards the end, and with Kelsey on the way out, and with question marks surrounding Mark Andrews after yet another difficult injury that he's dealing with, I think that this is a tight end that could be a year from now talked about as a top 3 guy. Like a perennial top 3 guy in redraft. This is a tight end who I think people are more excited about in Dynasty than they are in redraft. But this is a guy who could be a difference maker next year. We saw some insane pop-off games from Trey McBride hitting, over 100 yards in several games this year. If he can stay healthy, if that offense can stay healthy, and if Kyler Murray comes back to form after his injury, I think this is going to be a pretty good group, especially since your number 2 tight end, Pat Freiermuth, should be, a pretty average tight end and a good bye week fill-in. I don't think there's really much else to talk about in this group. Noah Gray technically has some upside coming in behind Kelsey if Kelsey chooses to walk away after this year, but I'm just not sure that he's going to fill. I mean, those are big shoes to fill, and I don't think it's reasonable to have expectations that that's going to be a player that is going to make an impact next year, even if Kelsey walks away and their offense doesn't add very many targets. All right, moving on down to picks. Now, this kid has so many picks, I can't even fit them all on one screen. So this is quite a list here. I've highlighted the 2 at the top. It's the 104 and the 109 in 2024. These are his 2 most valuable picks, and these are the picks that he's going to need to hit on this year in order to really set up his team for success. Without wide receivers, I don't think this is a roster that's going to compete in 2025, and I just don't know if there is enough wide receiver depth in this class to get you to a competitive spot, especially with the fact that your running backs still need some work, right? You can't operate on 2 running backs next year. So with that in mind, the 104 is probably going to go to whatever wide receiver not named Marvin Harrison Jr. falls out of the top 3. So the way I see this draft going in May is that we see Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and one of Drake May and or Romaduze or Neighbors taken in the top 3 picks. Those are the group that I see coming down. And the nice part is at the 104, you're guaranteed to get a wide receiver as long as one quarterback goes in the top 3. So I think this is a really solid pick to own. It's unfortunate that you're likely out of the Marvin Harrison Jr. sweepstakes, though if Jaden Daniels goes to a top roster, a top landing spot for him, I could easily see Marvin Harrison Jr. slipping a little bit in the actual rookie draft. So this is a great spot to be. The 109, by the way, you're welcome, is that's a good spot to be too, right? In this draft class here, there's a lot of wide receiver talent in the first and second round, in my opinion, that has a chance to make an impact early in their careers. So I think the 109, you're going to end up having, especially if there's a QB run in the first round of the actual NFL draft, you might have some of the top tier talent fall to you here. The big question that you're going to have to answer at some point is if Brock Bowers falls to you here, do you take him? And that's a tough decision. You also have 2 2024 mid-seconds. So solid picks to have, and then finally a 2024 mid-third. And here is where we get to my advice. This roster right now is a solid roster. It's got young talent in terms of quarterback, tight end. It's got a young wide receiver that you can build around. I don't think that you're going to be competing in 2024. And 2025 might be the time that you're looking. With that in mind, I think you need to add more long-term talent to your roster. And my highest priority for this roster in the 2023 offseason, or 2024 offseason, is to move on from Kenneth Walker. I think you can acquire a pick that is going to be a difference maker, somewhere in the first round possibly, or you can acquire a young wide receiver that hasn't truly broken out yet that you can add to this team and be a difference maker, right? Targets for that. I'm thinking maybe Jalen Waddle has had a down year. You might be able to get him plus something for Kenneth Walker from a contender. I'm thinking about Zay Flowers, who had a good finish to the year and looks to be that second target in an offense that is going to move the ball better next year, in my opinion. And you also could be targeting, a guy like Jordan Addison, who maybe it looks a little sketchy now, but talent tends to work itself out, and that guy looks good. So that would be something that I would be highly considering as you're moving through this offseason. I really don't think that there's any other major impact trades that I can recommend to you, as this is not going to be an offseason that you win right away from. All right, this is going to be an offseason that you're building for the future with. So that's going to do it for today. We went way over our 10-minute mark. I apologize. I'm just so excited about these rosters, excited to talk about it. I appreciate everyone for sticking around to the end of the video. If you made it here, please do like and subscribe. It really does actually help me as I'm just starting to get this channel off the ground. And we'll be back next week. We've been flip-flopping between the European and North American division. So we'll be back next week with the European team. I'll give you a teaser. The guy loves the Packers. So that's going to do it for us today. I love you all. And as always, this is the Mad Lad, Delft Dad, signing off.